Lazar, Alex Barth, as always. And Alex, we'll just let some people trickle in here in the next few minutes and start asking questions. If you have questions, drop them in the live chat and we will get to as many as we possibly can over the next hour or so. And Alex, we had the Trent Brown trade the other day. We broke that down on the podcast, but it feels like we're at the calm before the storm at this point, right? You know,
yes.
The chatter in free agency is kind of dying down a little bit as all the rumor mills kind of quiet up as we get closer and closer to really, I think March 15th is the start of free agency. March 17th is the official day that players can start signing. But I think we might hear about deals being done.
Right, that legal tampering period.
Correct. On March 15th, which is on Monday. So we're getting close. We're getting real close. And I can't wait until we can actually start talking about who they've actually signed and what they've actually done with their money, instead of just going back and forth about all of the possibilities that we've gone over how many times on this show at this point over the last month or so. But I wanted to go back to the Trent Brown trade just for a second and just hit on something real quick that we talked about a little bit, but I think we can talk about it a little bit again. And that is the type of offense that the Patriots want to be moving forward. And what kind of scheme do they really want to run? I've theorized in the past that maybe they would, kind of modernize the scheme a little bit and run some more RPO action, spread the field a little bit more, use some of the air raid concepts that creeped up to the NFL. But now they're building an offensive line where I think I saw a number that has a combined weight of something like 1,300 pounds or something crazy like that. And this is a power running offensive line, right? This is not an offensive line that is built to have a scrambling quarterback necessarily or built for this new age of football. This is a big, beefy offensive line that's going to want to run over people.
And they got two good backs, they have more than two good backs, but in terms of just insert, forcing your will on the opponent and just pushing them backwards and making them match you punch for punch, they have two really good backs for that, and Sony Michel and Damian Harris. So I do think we talked about power football at the end of the 2018 season, right? How they kind of adjusted in the playoffs. We talked about power football last season in the power running game with Cam Newton. I think it's about to go to another level this year. I think what we thought of as power, smash mouth, bully football in terms of the New England Patriots for the last few years could be dwarfed by what they do this year. And I'm excited by that. I love it. I love physical football. I know some people don't want to see them run the ball 25, 30 times a game, but with all that beef on the field, when you can just, enforce your will, inflict your will upon your opponent, I'm excited for that. I think that could be a ton of fun. And also, let's remember, there's a generational fullback in this draft in Ben Mason. And it's nothing against Jakob Johnson, but, there might be little tells here and there. That's one I can think of where, coming down the, coming down the stretch, we might kind of get more of an indication. Can I tell you what I'm really excited about today, though? Because it goes back to what did you call it? The tagline of our show?
Yes.
Uncharacteristically aggressive. I might make that my Twitter bio. So I don't know if you saw this. Mike Reese took part in ESPN did something where they basically had their beat writers for all 32 teams act as the GM and put out hypothetical offers on the top 50 free agents and what they think would be a realistic offseason. And Mike Reese was like the meme of Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street, right? Spending all the money. I mean, he gave Kenny Golladay, I think 25. He gave him 5 years, $100 million.
Yeah.
He gave Yannick Ngakoue a pretty good deal. I don't remember exactly what, but he spent. And remember who had the uncharacteristically aggressive report?
Correct.
Was Mike Reese. So he comes out with the uncharacteristically aggressive report. Then he, in what's supposed to be a realistic experiment, gives Kenny Golladay $100 million, gives Yannick Ngakoue the biggest offer. I think he was double the next closest offer. What does Mike Reese know? What exactly does he know? Because I like the little trail of breadcrumbs he's leaving us right now. I don't know where it's going to lead, but if it leads us where I think it's going to lead us, we're going to have a ton of fun here this next year.
Well, I think what it comes down to, and I reported the other day that the Patriots are going to be active in the wide receiver market, and I said that you might have some sticker shock. And 5 years, $105 million for Kenny Golladay, I think, would be sticker shock. And we had one of our first questions that got asked is Kenny Golladay a real possibility? And I think that the question is not so much the money, because I think the Patriots are going to be willing to pay him what he wants, or pay his market value at least. But I think that, with him, the question really is how much does he care about the Matt Patricia Lions and the culture fit and the things like that? And does he feel like he wants to go to another? And we've talked about this before, that Matt Patricia was like a caricature version of the Patriot way, right? He's like the cartoon version of like taking it way, way too far the other direction, whereas Bill Belichick is more somewhere in the middle with it. But Kenny Golladay, from the outside looking in, is probably going to have some impressions that is the Patriot way, right? That is the way that things are done here in New England. It is a very stringent regimen here. It's not something that you come in and goof around. It's not something that you come and collect your money and then you can kind of ease it back a little bit. No, like this is a full go all the time type of organization. And Kenny Golladay has to be sort of on board with that. I think Mike Reese ended up offering him 5 years, $105 million. And the Patriots ended up getting the player in the exercise because he offered him something like $40 million more than anybody else was willing to offer Kenny Golladay. And that's where the Patriots are going to have to be, right? They're going to have to be one of those teams. And I've been saying it, that we wake up on March 17th and we look down at our phones and the Patriots just signed Kenny Golladay to a 5-year, $100 million contract with $60 million guaranteed. That's the type of aggressive offer they're going to have to make to get a player of that caliber, because you don't want him to think about it, right? You don't want him to go shop it around. You don't want him to go say, oh, well, I can go play with Aaron Rodgers, or I can go play with Patrick Mahomes, or I can go play with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and the Patriots don't really have a quarterback, and who's going to throw me the football? No, you want to say, Kenny Golladay, this is your second contract. You haven't gotten paid yet. You were a third-round pick. You are not a first top 5 guy that has money in the bank. Here you go. Here's your life savings, right? You're set for life here with this contract. That's what the Patriots are that's what they're going to have to do at this point, I think.
Yeah, just to kind of rephrase what you said, and you touched on it, I don't know it's, how much does he care about the Lions-Patriots connection and all of that? It's what's the dollar amount that makes him not care? Right. He's going to care. I think he's going to care, but everybody has their price, and it's just finding that price, whatever it is, and if it's something the Patriots can pay. So that's their draw this year. Everybody says New England's no longer a draw. They're still a major draw, not in the way they used to be, but they have the third most cap space. They can pay. Yeah. And some players want rings. Some players want to play close to home. Some players don't want to play in the cold. Like, I get it. Everybody's different. 80, 90% of the time, player goes to the highest bidder. And for the most part, the Patriots are in a position where they can be the highest bidder on whatever player they want this offseason. So
yeah. There you go. And
that's simple.
Let's go to a quarterback question, because I feel like this Jimmy or Cam discussion, I don't know if it's necessarily one or the other, but the Jimmy discussion in general, I wanted to have today again, and just kind of get.
So I think that the better way to phrase this question is, on a scale of 1 or 10, which quarterback would you rather have?
Yeah.
You see what I did there?
Yeah, I think
scale of 1 or 10 jersey numbers.
That's NFL Game Pass in the background on my computer, of course. And
stop watching film.
Yeah, right. I'm doing both at once. Now, I think the conversation I don't necessarily want to have it Jimmy versus Cam. I do want to talk about Jimmy, though, a little bit. Ian Rappaport had a report earlier today that said that his impression is that Jimmy Garoppolo is not going anywhere. I think it's easy for the San Francisco 49ers to say that right now, because that's the right thing to do organizationally, because if they don't move Jimmy Garoppolo, then he has to be comfortable coming back to San Francisco and being the quarterback there next year. But I think there's a sort of agreement among Patriots fans in a way that bringing back Jimmy is like this sure thing in terms of his performance if he came back, right? You know who he is. He's been in the system. They loved him before, and everything would just be peachy if we brought Jimmy Garoppolo back. I think that there's a reason why the 49ers, and it goes beyond durability, I think. He is somebody that has a ceiling. There's a ceiling about what he can actually do, and there is a limit to what he can actually do. He is not one of these quarterbacks that comes in and adds a whole lot outside of the playmakers and outside of the scheme, just on individual talent, right?
He's not going to be. I saw somebody compare it the other day to Ryan Tannehill, and if you get him just a change of scenery, he might be better. And Tannehill kind of had this unexpected takeoff. He doesn't have that. I don't think he has that in him. I think he is what he is at this point.
Yeah, I think he is what he is, and what he is a very accurate and quick passer in the short and intermediate level of the field, which does fit the Patriots a lot. But the problem is that if he's not getting the ball out quickly and doesn't have the receivers to get the ball in their hands and create with it after the catch, it is difficult at times to create explosive plays with Jimmy Garoppolo as the quarterback because he is not a great downfield thrower. He doesn't extend plays with his legs. This is a three-step drop and out type of quarterback, right? This is a quarterback that hits the back foot and wants to get the football out or wants to get to his second read quickly after he eliminates the first one and get the football out then. And I think that there is a ceiling. And a lot of people in San Francisco have talked about this. That's why for San Francisco, the appeal of a Trey Lance or the appeal of a Justin Fields or whoever it might be in the draft is because those quarterbacks, or if you want to go crazy and go Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, those quarterbacks can take you to that next level. And Jimmy is one of those guys that you can win with, but I'm not sure you're winning because of that player.
Yeah, again, he's a net neutral, right? He doesn't make you better, but he doesn't make you worse. He's not going to lose you games, but he's not going to win you games either. He is whatever you put around him, right? If you put him in last year's offense, you probably win 5 or 6 games. When you put him in an offense that has the playmaker San Francisco does, he'll get you to the Super Bowl. He's a sponge. Whatever's around him, that's what he's going to be. He's not going to make any players better, but he's not going to make any players around him worse. So, he's vegetables. I think he's the free agent version of Mac Jones. And that might sound, or not free agent, but like veteran version of Mac Jones. That might sound weird because I've been a very big Mac Jones guy and I'm not a very big Jimmy Garoppolo guy. The difference is I think Mac Jones has a higher ceiling and you're only paying him, $10 million for first round quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is what he is. There's the durability issue and you're paying him $25 million. So I just, I go back to it. If you're going to eat your vegetables, I think Mac Jones is the guy. More so than Jimmy Garoppolo, if that's the route you want to go. But I know that's not quite the question, but like you can hate the Jimmy Garoppolo move for durability. Outside of that, you can't really hate it or like it. It just is what it is. It's just dealing with the situation as it exists.
Yeah, and because we're on this topic, we can talk about Brandon Cooks as well. And you wrote on 98.5, kind of bringing the band back together, right?
Yep. You 12 players.
You bring Jimmy back, you bring Brandon Cooks back, and that was the offense that Bill Belichick thought that he was going to after Tom Brady retired or after Tom Brady moved on. They thought that they were going to be in an offense with Jimmy G as their starting quarterback, with Brandon Cooks as their number one wide receiver. There is a chance. Now, Brandon Cooks reworked his contract today. It sounds like he wants to stay in Houston. Everything that he has set up until this point is that he's done bouncing around, right? He's been bouncing around for the last 4 or 5 years. He's done doing that. He wants to stick in one place. He loves playing with Deshaun Watson. So right now there's not a whole lot there in terms of trading for Brandon Cooks. But let's say he does become available. Let's say they trade Deshaun Watson. They decide to blow it up completely and Brandon Cooks is available. I think we're both a yes on this one.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. They need speed. They need a downfield threat. They need a true number one receiver. They need a guy who wants to be here and is going to buy in. I mean, every bucks. Brandon Cooks, I get why they let him go, but I think letting him go, they should have paid him. They should have paid him. I don't think they ultimately would have ended up paying him the ridiculous contract the Rams did. I think there would have been a more team-friendly deal. They should have kept him. When they got him at the time, I thought, and granted, I might have been wrong. I thought the Saints traded the wrong receiver. They traded Brandon Cooks because they could only pay him or Michael Thomas. And I thought at the time they traded the wrong guy. I thought Cooks was better. Now, Michael Thomas has since had some NFL record seasons. We're now kind of seeing how limited he is. So it might be open to interpretation which one is ultimately the better player at the end of their careers. But yeah, if they can get him back in the door, like, look, put him in this free agency class. Where does he rank in this free agency class? Towards the top. He's probably a top 5 free agent wide receiver in this class.
Yeah, in that role specifically, it's kind of between him and like a guy like a Curtis Samuel. John Brown's now a free agent because
I think he's better than Curtis Samuel.
Well, Curtis Samuel is better with the ball in his hands, but Brandon Cooks is a better deep threat than Curtis Samuel is. So it's just kind of your preference of what style of receiver that you want. So I'm all for bringing Brandon Cooks back, though. All I've been clamoring for all offseason is big plays. Get me as as many guys that can create big plays as you possibly can, because I've just been sick and tired of watching the slowest offense in the league week in and week out go out there. In 2020 and 2021, the Patriots can't seem to get any speed on offense, which is like every other team you turn on every other Sunday. They got 5 guys that run in the 4.3s. And I'm not just talking about running fast at the combine. They got guys that can actually translate the speed on a game in game days. And that's what the Patriots have really been missing. I would say even going back to 2018, they weren't a very fast team, right? That team was still more of a ground and pound physical type of offense. I would love to see the Patriots get some more speed. Brandon Cook certainly checks that box. He's a guy that went out of his way to praise the Patriots, right? He was asked about it during Super Bowl week. How hard is it to play for the Patriots? How hard is it to play for Bill Belichick? And he stood on the table for them a little bit. And I think that definitely is something that you can't, doesn't go unnoticed, I would say. And that's a guy that if they can get him, then great. If not, there is some options, I would say, not to his level, but maybe a guy like a John Brown or a Nelson Aguilar brings similar kind of vertical speed to the offense as Brandon Cooks. But Cooks has been a professional at that skill set, at that sort of role for a while now. This is an interesting question because I don't think there is an answer, right? If Cam's the QB next year, what acquisitions would help him the most? To me, the acquisitions aren't the question. It's Cam needs to help himself, right? Cam needs to get himself figured out for him to play good football again. Obviously, getting good receivers and good tight ends and whatnot can help a lot for a quarterback. But if he doesn't get his timing down, if he doesn't get his footwork down, if he doesn't get his mechanics to where they were at the beginning of last season, where he was a little bit more accurate. There was a clip that our friend Taylor Kyles threw out there yesterday of Cam against Seattle. And you just see how Cam's feet were syncing up with his mind in that game, right? He was going through his reads. He was moving his feet in the pocket. His feet were lining up with his throws. And then as the season wore on, that just disappeared, right? That just slowly that got worse and worse and worse. And I don't know if there is an individual player where I would say, oh, this guy would fit great with Cam or that guy would fit great with Cam. But he needs to fix himself if they're going to be able to be a good offense with him at quarterback.
I mean, I would say, if we're going to just go down this road hypothetically, right?
Yeah.
You need to either bring James White back or upgrade at pass catching running back because I don't think there were enough. He probably should have thrown the ball more to the running back than he did last year. That's an adjustment you make. It's tough to make that adjustment if you lose James White. And I know people like JJ Taylor, and there's a lot to like, but you still don't totally know what he's going to look like. The other guy, you need somebody who's good in contested catch situations because Cam really had trouble leading receivers last year, and somebody who's going to be able to go back through the defender and get the ball if it's thrown behind him. The irony in that one is that's what N'Keal Harry should be.
Right.
And he's not, so you rule him out. But N'Keal Harry really should have been Cam Newton's binky last year. That was the guy that it made a ton of sense, and he wasn't. And now they're looking to trade him, which I think great. But yeah, so those if you're going to go down that road, those would be my two. Go get a legit pass catching running back, Duke Johnson. I won't say pay Aaron Jones because Evan will have a heart attack, but go get Duke Johnson. And then just see what you can do with N'Keal or try to go get a N'Keal type of player, an established N'Keal type of player, not in the draft. Go get, JuJu, go get Marvin Jones, like a guy like that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I was thinking with it too. If we have to answer the question directly, it's got to be a guy that's going to run to a spot and you're going to throw him the ball and have him box somebody out or go above the rim or something like that. These little, I think what happens with Cam is oftentimes, and we saw this with Edelman when he was healthy last year before, the wheels came off on his season. The little kind of, jitterbug guys for Cam are tough because you got to know where they're going, first of all, right? You got to have that sixth sense and that connection to know where they're going. But second of all, they don't have the largest catch radiuses, right? So if Cam throws a little behind them or he throws a little low or a little high, Julian Edelman's 5'9", 5'10". He's not going to be able to go outside his frame a whole lot and pluck balls that are maybe just a little bit off, catchable, but a little bit off. So in order to get that kind of out of them. I think that they need to go bigger at receiver. I think they need to get a bunch of power forwards, right? And just let Cam kind of muscle the ball down the field and overpower people at the catch point. That's probably the best way to build an offense around him. And the Panthers tried that, right? They drafted Kelvin Benjamin. Yeah. They got Devin Funches. They got Greg Olsen. That was the first Cam offense in Carolina.
And then Christian McCaffrey too for the other half of that.
Right. And then they sort of went more towards Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, guys that could create a lot of separation. I think Cam struggled a little bit throwing to those guys because they are smaller, because they don't have that large catch radius. So that I would start with the big boys if you're going to bring back Cam Newton. This question about Damian Harris, is he going to be the bell cow next year, or is he going to still be splitting carries with Sony Michel, I would presume is the question.
So it'll be much easier to answer this question on May 3rd when we know what's going on with Sony's option, right? If it's Sony's last year, they're probably going to just run him into the ground. I wouldn't be shocked if we hear that there may be entertaining offers on Sony Michel. And you're selling high, right? Came back from that injury last year, had a great end of the year over the last 3 weeks, averaged 6.1 yards a carry. You have Harris, you have JJ Taylor. It's a pretty good running back draft. You can dip back in on day 3 and get somebody. I wouldn't be surprised if they look to move Sony. If he's back, though, I think that he is, at least initially, in the mix 50-50, and we'll see what happens. Somebody's going to end up winning the job during the season, and it'll probably be more of a 75-25 split. Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if Sony's a potential trade candidate.
Yeah, well, I looked at that 5th-year option the other day for Sony and for
right. His isn't bad.
It's I think he's in that $4.5 million threshold, which isn't terrible, but it's still a lot of money to me to be paying a guy like that. And I'll admit this with Sony, he got a fire lit under him when Damian Harris kind of took his job, right? And he came back after those injuries and stuff, and he was a much more elusive, a much more explosive runner after that. And you could tell that the urgency picked up a little bit for him, and I think he's a 1st-round pick. He had good success his rookie season. I think he was reading his own press clippings a little bit, and then Damian Harris comes in. He looks like a much better back than Sony Michel. And I think there is still a degree of Damian Harris that has a different gear than Sony, right? When he gets in the open field, he's able to pull away a little bit differently than Sony Michel. But at the end of the day, they're both power backs. Right? They're both bigger guys. Neither one of them is Chris Johnson, right? Neither one of them is a true home run hitter, Right. But I think Damian Harris has a little bit more juice, a little bit more of that second gear that Sony never really showed us in the open field, because he could get, he could break a tackle. He could, run through with some power and lower his pads and push the pile. But when he got out in the open field, you just could tell that guys could catch him, right? He was getting caught from behind. He wasn't able to pull away from defensive backs at the NFL level. I think Damian Harris has a little bit more of that in his game. Let's talk about JuJu, because the report came out today that maybe JuJu would be open to sort of a 1-year prove-it deal to kind of reset his market because he didn't have a great season last year. I'm a little bit iffy on JuJu in general, and I'll tell you why. The first thing is, this is a guy that plays in the slot 85 to 90% of the time. He is a slot receiver, right? He is not an outside guy. And I hear a lot that people say, oh, he can, play inside and outside. Theoretically, yeah, he can play inside and outside, but you're going to want him working the middle of the field. You're not going to put him out on the boundary and have him running a vertical route tree. It's not going to go the way that you want it. The second thing is that if he sniffs, maybe this did humble him a little bit, but if he sniffs any sort of success, we're going to see the TikTok videos. We're going to see him dancing on the logos. We're going to see him, in the media. We're going to see him talking. We're going to see him jabbing. I don't know if he fits the culture here either. And those are 2 big things for me.
Yeah, if they didn't take, and it's 2 different kinds of issues, 2 remotely different kinds of issues that aren't on the same level, but if they didn't take Antonio Brown's phone away, they're not going to take JuJu's phone away.
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. If it's a 1-year thing, does Bill maybe think it's worth the risk? Like, I could see that, right? If it goes ass up, it's 1 year and then you move on. It is what it is. The long-term deal, I don't think he gets here. I'd never considered that. The fact he'd be open to a 1-year deal, I think makes it more realistic. And say what you will about JuJu, I think he does have that killer instinct in him where he knows that he was on the precipice of being considered a top 5 wide receiver, and now he's considered bargain bin guy. And I think he knows that. And I don't think that's going to sit well with him. And I think he is going to have it in him to want to get back to that point where he was after his rookie year, where he was like the young receiver out there, right? He was like the next guy.
Yeah, he had 1,400 yards in his second season.
Right. I think he's going to want to get back to that. I don't think he's okay being the TikTok guy and kind of being, a one-year wonder or, an early peak kind of guy. And if Bill can tap into that and say, hey, shut up for a year, come here, we're going to make you a top 5 receiver in the league. And because I do think he has that potential in him. So like if Bill can give him that and then say, and then you can go TikTok wherever you want, like that's probably the way it works. But there's a lot of ifs in there. So I don't know. I do think, like I just said, I think he can be a top 5 receiver. I think he's a very good player. I don't think that he's unique. I think you can get the same skills more or less without the baggage and without the risk and without a guy who seems to be declining in play at age, 24, 25, something like that.
Right. Well, so the guy that they already have him rostered, right? The guy that's JuJu without the name brand is Jakobi Meyers, right? That they're very similar.
Yeah, he's not. I don't think he's as explosive. I don't think he's as fast as JuJu is.
I would agree there.
That's athletic.
JuJu's a low 4.5 guy too. It's not he's not a burner by any means. I think he's a better player than Jakobi Meyers. Don't get me wrong, but we talked about this. Is he $10 to $12 million better than Jakobi Meyers? I don't know. I think it's borderline. And the question I have with JuJu, I think the point I have with JuJu is that he's the backup plan, right? He's if you strike out on Kenny Golladay, you strike out on Corey Davis, and you strike out on Curtis Samuel, and you strike out on the 2 tight ends, on the top of free agency, and you just need to get somebody, right? You need to get somebody in here with a sexy name, somebody in here that adds you to your passing game. Then JuJu on a 1-year deal, prove it deal. This could be the team of misfits. This could be the team of bunch of 1-year deals, guys that were cut, guys that, were afterthoughts in the free agent market in a tight capped year, the Kyle Van Noys, the JuJus, the Cams, maybe, those types of players. And if you get enough of those guys and you get them all pointed in the right direction, then maybe you can make something out of that. But is that plan A? No. Absolutely not. That's a nice story and everything, but that definitely cannot be your plan A.
No. And look, he can be plan B in the sense too, where if you get Kenny Golladay, adding JuJu, then you go out and you get JuJu and he's your second acquisition. And now you're building something. So plan B in the sense that he's not your top offer, but I don't think that rules him out. I'm still not super into it. The other thing is, and you can probably answer this, like, is there potential for him to become a more well-rounded wide receiver? Is there a potential if they put him in the right spot where he can start playing outside a little bit more? Because that's right. If you're going to pay him, I think, and if the Patriots are going to pay him, they're going to look to see, well, can we get more out of this guy? And if that potential's there, then maybe you take a bit of a longer look at it.
Yeah, so coming out of college, the big knock on JuJu is that he ran somewhere in the 4.5s, and he wasn't an explosive player on tape at USC either. He's a very technically savvy player, very good at the catch point, can box out, uses size inside, things like that. And that's the type of player he's carried over to in the NFL. And then in his first and second year in the league, it did seem like he found a little bit of another gear. I think he was training with the Pittsburgh wide receivers coach at the time, Antonio Brown, training with the right guys that knew how to get speed, guys who knew how to get faster, guys who knew how to work on that sort of thing. And he was able to kind of get some juice in his legs that wasn't necessarily there at SC. So maybe there is some potential there. But I've never really watched JuJu and seen a guy that was proficient on the outside. When you're on the outside, you have to be explosive off the line of scrimmage. You have to have good initial bursts off the line because that's what sets up everything on that position, right? If you're slow off the line, then these DBs are just going to wear you down. They're going to be all over you. If you can get up the field, you can get them on your back hip, then you can cut, then you can go over the top of them, then you can set up back shoulders and comeback routes and stick routes and things over the middle of the field, and that's sort of a different skill set. I would say that's definitely more in the realm of like Corey Davis, for example, than somebody like JuJu. So it just kind of depends on your style, I suppose. N'Keal Harry, trade rumors. I don't know if that's what we should call them. I think it's funny how everybody, who was it? I think it was Garofalo reported teams are calling the Patriots about N'Keal Harry. I think it's probably the other way around, and the Patriots are calling teams about N'Keal Harry and sort of shopping him around. I think that the question really is it worth giving up on him if it's not a bit major return, right? If we're talking about a day 3 pick, if we're talking about just getting rid of him for a 6th rounder, because I actually think that it might be worth it for that anyways, but I just wanted to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I still think, and we talked about this the other day, I giving up on him, like if you give up on him for a pick, you're giving up on him. I wonder if there's a way to trade problem for problem in that you find another team with another guy on a rookie deal in a similar spot where you just maybe, hey, our guy needs to change of scenery. Your guy needs to change of scenery. Let's help each other out kind of thing. We discussed this loosely a couple weeks ago, Hollywood Brown. And they're kind of, it seems like,
some people have thrown out Andy Isabella. Who's
I think Andy Isabella is maybe a little too much, but like go get one. And it doesn't have to be a wide receiver either, right? Patriots have other needs maybe. And I'd have to like go through and look at spot track and all this, but maybe there's a linebacker somewhere. Maybe there's a tight end somewhere that's on a rookie deal or on an affordable deal that just the team can't afford them or they need to change of scenery or whatever. And it's, hey, you need a wide receiver. You try this guy. We need this guy. We'll give him a shot and back and forth. So the Hollywood Brown one is the one I threw out on 98.5thesportshub.com. But, maybe even a quarterback. Maybe even, is that somebody asked what the value is for Jimmy? I don't think you're doing Jimmy for N'Keal straight up. But for San Francisco, I don't know that they're looking to get, if they replace Garoppolo, where they move up in the draft, or if they get Deshaun Watson, or if they get Sam Darnold, I don't know that they're looking to get a return for Jimmy. I think it's more just getting rid of that $25 million so that they can, put pieces around that new quarterback. So then is it something where, hey, you got a bunch of speedsters, you want a big body receiver, and we'll take that contract off your hands, something like that. Like, I think that's where I look if I'm trading N'Keal Harry is I think he's a long shot at this point. I'm not ready to write him off, but I think he's a long shot. But is there another long shot that somebody else is done with that maybe I think has a little bit better chance in New England specifically? And then that's the swap I look to make. The Garoppolo one's probably a stretch. That one's probably a little bit much, but I was just trying to think of examples off the top of my head.
So there's two things for me here, and one trade and one other. My fear with N'Keal Harry is that if the Patriots keep him around, they're going to convince themselves that they can still get that first round pick. Right, that they can still get the guy they thought that they were getting in the draft a few years
that has
ago.
to be your mindset if you keep him around.
If that's the mindset, I think that it's worth just getting him out of the building at that point, because honestly, they need to realize that they need to put him on the back burner for a second and let him kind of develop in the background. Because if they're going to sit here and sell us on Jacoby Myers and N'Keal Harry and maybe, John Brown or something like that again, and that we should not say that that's a good offseason.
Right. Everybody's just going to double John Brown and you're back where you were last year.
Right. And I don't even know if John Brown needs doubling. So that's a whole another sort of thing about this, is that I do want to see them upgrade at that spot. I want to see them get somebody like a Corey Davis, like a Tim Patrick, even like a guy, on a smaller deal, obviously, but somebody like a Sammy Watkins who is different there. Just a guy that can bring in something different and maybe bring in some more upside. And maybe
a guy who's done it, a guy who's proven he can do it, I think is the baseline. And N'Keal hasn't done that. So, if we're talking picks, it's day 3. It might even be a pick swap.
So what I would try to do is the pick swap. So I wonder if the Patriots trade N'Keal Harry and let's say like a 5th round pick, and if that package could land them a top 100 pick, right? Can they get a 4th top 100 pick?
I don't know.
By
I think that's a stretch.
You think that's not? I don't know if that's that much of a stretch.
Evan, he has like 400 career receiving yards in 2 years. He hasn't been able to stay on the field.
But some people are going to look at him and say it's not a good offense for him, right?
But you know who would be the guy who would make that trade with a former 1st round pick who's been underused? I'll buy a little high on him. That's Bill Belichick. Is that you're looking for another Belichick to make that trade?
In Houston, that was Nick's pick, right? N'Keal Harry was Nick's guy. So maybe.
Oh my God! If Houston gives up a top 100 pick for N'Keal Harry, oh my God!
But you're not. You are giving up a top 100 pick, but you're not, right? Because you're trading a pick to move down like 75 spots or something like that, right? It's not like you're truly giving up that top 100 pick. But if I'm the Patriots, I'd much rather go back to the drawing board, get another top 100 pick. Maybe you can get an Amari Rodgers with that pick, or maybe you can get a Taylor Wallace with that pick, or whoever it is that you like. You know what I mean? At that spot and kind of start over. I think the Patriots, when I look at this draft, I would really love to see them get a fourth top 100 pick if they can somehow. Maybe they package their 2 4s to move up back into day 2. That's what I'm looking for is can they use him to kind of use that, because to me, they need that talent, right? They need that level of talent. They don't need the 6th round pick, right? They need the 3rd round pick guys, the Chase Winoviches, the Damian Harrises, and they have to hope that they can find some guys in that range that can help this football team.
And they're going to do that by trading down. They're going to do that. I look at Jacksonville. Jacksonville has 25, and I think it's 30. Or Jacksonville is it's 25 and 46. Right? Do you give up 15 for 25 and 46, and maybe another day 3 pick? Like that's and I had that in my first mock draft. I think that's what it was. I think it was 15 for 25, 46, and I want to say like 130. Yeah. Like that's a trade I totally see them making.
If they don't like one of the quarterbacks, if they're not in one of the quarterbacks, then that's a fine trade to make in this situation, because you need the picks, right? You need the players, you need the talent at multiple positions. So if you're telling me that they don't love any of these quarterbacks, or all of them go in the top 8, so they can't get one of these quarterbacks, and the move is to trade down, draft Zaven Collins in the 1st round in the 20s, and then stockpile those picks on day 2 and start taking swings on day 2, then that's probably the way to go if you're not going to draft Mac Jones, right? I think that's sort of a really fine situation. I know it'll drive a lot of Patriots fans nuts, so that's why I'm kind of saying, hey, it's going to be okay if that's the decision they make. Let's look at this defensive question, because I don't think we're talking a lot about defense at all, because the offense is sexy, right? Let's talk about receivers. Yeah. Let's talk about quarterbacks. I want to talk about 3-4 defensive ends for a second, though, because I think that was a huge weakness of this team last year, was the line of scrimmage on defense, the defensive line in particular, and the interior defenders. So the one name I want to throw out there is somebody that I really think that we should be talking about more for the Patriots, and that is current Broncos defensive end Shelby Harris, who is an all-around dynamite player. He can play the run, he can rush the passer, he can line up anywhere across the line of scrimmage. He's a guy that lined up a lot at defensive tackle, played some end though, played some nose. They ran multiple fronts there in Denver under Fangio, and they did a bunch of different things with Shelby Harris. They really moved him around that defensive line. He screams Patriots to me. Extremely versatile player. Like I said, a two-way guy, right? He can play the run, he can play the pass. You can keep him on the field on all 3 downs. He's right around that $11 million projection. It's not a ton of money given the fact that they have $60+ million in cap space. If they want to spend on one defensive player, I think the guy should really be Shelby Harris.
Derek Wolf's another good one. Somebody just threw in the chat, but I like Harris. I threw out this comp last time we talked about him. You didn't love it, but I'm going to stick with it. He reminds me of Lawrence Guy when Lawrence Guy first got to New England.
Yeah.
And in that, he came into the league. He can play all 3 spots. He came in the league primarily as a run stopper. He's grown a lot as a pass rusher. He's like right on the cusp, I think, of he's a 3-down player now, but he's right on the cusp of becoming like a true like linchpin 3-down defensive lineman. A chance to buy on a guy who I think is really about to explode and hit his prime and find his stride. So that's been the one for me. I know Matthew Judon is kind of a linebacker end. Yeah, however you look at it, right, he's the sexy name, and Ngakoue is the sexy name in this conversation. But I
wanted to talk about Ngakoue too, because and this is no slight on people that like Mike Reese that said the Patriots might go after him, because they did love him in the 2016 draft. But Ngakoue has turned into a pass rush specialist. This is a guy that wants to play from what is called a wide 9 alignment. So we're going all the way out over the tight end, right? And he wants to pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. This is not a 3-4 end. This is not a Patriots defensive end. This is a guy that really wants to be in a 4-3 system and really get after the QB. I don't think he's a system fit here anymore. anymore because of what we've seen out of that type of player, right?
But did he change because he wanted to, or like, is that a Ravens thing? Like, can he come? Is he willing to come in and play 3-4?
So in Jacksonville, he played in a 4-3. They played in that Seattle style scheme, right? And
yeah, I don't know why I just said Baltimore. I'm sorry. I'm thinking. No, I was still thinking Judon.
Right.
Keep going.
So, he is, to me, that is his skill set, right? That's the player that he has blossomed into, and his pass rush productivity has not been insane. He hasn't been one of those guys that's racking up 18 sacks. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I see the system fit with Ngakoue. And he's got length. He's got explosiveness off the ball, certainly. He's got heavy hands in the pass rush. But this is not a player that wants to play the run. This is not a player that's going to line up inside and take on double teams and hold up in gaps and two gap at the point of attack. That's not that guy. Shelby Harris is a little bit more of that guy. I think a guy like Sheldon Rankins or Daquan Jones, if they want to go in like the bargain bin a little bit more, those are sort of those types of players. And Ngakoue is a pass rusher. He should be going to a system that allows him to pin his ears back. Someplace like the Los Angeles Rams, for example, would be a great fit for Yannick Ngakoue, not the Patriots system. I don't think. And I get that they liked him in 2016, but I don't know if that still kind of carries over based off of everything that we've seen since then.
Carl Lawson's a good name. Somebody just put that in the chat. If we're going to talk about pass rushers, I'm going beyond the defensive end thing at this point. But if we're going to talk about pass rushers, the guy I like is a sleeper. And Matt Dolph, who I work with at 98.5, he wrote this morning, like, if the Patriots made a Stephon Gilmore type of signing this year, right? If you remember when they signed Gilmore, corner wasn't a huge position of need. Nobody really expected them to be in on him. It kind of came out of nowhere, and they gave him a ton of money. And if they were to do that again this year, a position that's not at the top of their list, a guy who's a proven star, who they're going to give the bag to, I really like Bud Dupree in that hypothetical. Yeah. I think he'd be great next to Dante Hightower.
He's going to get paid on that 1 year, though.
Even coming off the torn ACL?
I think so. I mean, that's what the over the cap.
So I guess that's kind of the point that I'm making is Gilmore. Like, this is a Gilmore type of thing. This isn't a discount. This is like what the Gilmore signing was, where they just saw a really talented player who was a really good fit. Hightower's contract's up next year. Malcolm Butler's contract was up right when they signed Gilmore, and it's just this is a really good player. This is the only chance we're going to get to have him. He'll have a role here for a long time. We have the money to get him. Let's just do it. And it's that kind of signing, uncharacteristically aggressive, but they've done it before with Gilmore. I think he's a really interesting fit in that spot. And I'd like to see it. The other thing is, and you mentioned he's going to get paid on the long-term deal. The one thing is, because it is this offseason, and we're going to see all the one-year deals, right? Because guys want to hit the market next year when the cap goes back up. And Jerry Jones is hinting we have this big TV contract coming, right? I wonder, let's say the market's not there for him. Let's say people are still worried about the knee, and it's a really deep free agent class at that position, and there's not a ton of money. And let's say it's only 1 year deals. What better place for him to prove the knee isn't an issue and reset his value than in New England? And if it's a bunch of 15, 16 million 1 year deals, and the Patriots can offer 17, which no other team can, that lines up. So I think it's a long shot. I'm not saying this is going to happen. But I like it in theory, and it's not a totally alien idea compared to moves they've made in previous years.
Right. So over the cap right now is projecting that he's going to get a 1 year, $13 million deal.
Okay.
Basically that prove it deal, right?
Right. So the Patriots offer 15.
So the question is do the Patriots offer him a real $13 million, right? Because the Patriots like to make these contracts look like they're a lot of money, but in reality, there's a ton of per game roster bonuses. There's a ton of playing time incentives thrown in there. And for a guy like Bud Dupree, who's coming off an injury, my guess is that they would throw in some playing time, not likely to be earned incentives in there. And is he going to hit those, right? Is he going to be fully healthy to start the season? Is he going to be able to play 70% of the snaps? Is that a number he can actually get to? But as in terms of his skill set, he is a power rusher. That's not necessarily a guy that he's not going to try to spin you. He's not going to try to arm over and all these kind of crazy pass rush moves. He is definitely a get off the ball and get to the tackle's edge and push him back, right? That's the type of player he is. And that definitely does fit what they do. That's the type of guy that they would, I think, want in their system. I just wonder if they give him the real money that another team is willing to give him, because a lot of these other teams don't structure the contracts the way the Patriots do.
Again, uncharacteristically aggressive. They can give him more money. They can give him more money than they can give him more money than just about any team.
Sure.
And if it's a 1 year, right, and it's a really good spot for him to come off that knee injury and prove that he is, because before the knee injury, he's probably a borderline $20 million a year player, right? Am I off base on that? So
his 2 years ago, right, was the season that he had
11 and a half sacks. Yeah. And then he had 8.5 in 11 games last year before the knee injury. So a little step back, but if there, but that's what teams are looking for, right? Is he the guy who had 11 and a half sacks 2 years ago? What better place for him to prove it than in New England, in this system, playing next to Donta Hightower, playing for Bill Belichick, Gerard Mayo? And I think that's the pitch from the Patriots is, hey, we'll give you a chance to earn more. We'll give you a chance to earn more money than any of these other teams this year. And we're going to put you in the best position to cash in next year. I think that's the pitch.
Yeah.
If that's the route they go.
So can we go back to uncharacteristically aggressive? And let's ask the question first, and then whatever question you wanted next week, I can pull it up. Yep. But this, to me, is a dream scenario that they can somehow pair these two guys together, because
this is the other tagline of our show.
Yes.
Is Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel.
Yes, because these two guys together perfectly offset each other, right? You got the slot Z receiver and Curtis Samuel, who's going to move all around the formation. He's going to catch the ball behind the line of scrimmage like a running back and make guys miss and create with the ball in his hands. He's going to get vertical. And Corey Davis is your outside receiver, right? He's going to work the sideline. He's going to work the intermediate level. He's going to work the back shoulders and the high point fades and all that kind of stuff. These two guys are yin and yang. They're a perfect matchup together. The Patriots could get them both, I would say, presumably for somewhere around $25 million combined. That's aggressive, right? That's a lot of money on wide receivers, but I don't think that you can think of two guys in this free agent class that go together as well as these two guys do, because they do have such complementary skill sets.
Yeah, go get, we've talked about it a ton. Like every time just pick two hypothetical wide receivers, it's always these two, and then go get, if you can get Brandon Cooks as the third option, if not him, Rashad Perryman, and that's that, and then you throw in the tight end and you have an offense. So I'm all about it. Because it's going to be a quick conversation. Yeah. Somebody brought up Malcolm Butler, and we do need to talk about it. It's not going to happen. There's a ton of room for them, especially if they trade Gilmore, to bring in, a veteran alternative corner like Malcolm Butler. He's not coming back because I'm pretty sure those bridges have been burned. Seems like they have. But if we're going to do the reunion talk, how can you have a reunion? Like it's they talked about having what was the TV show? There was some TV show they were going to do that 70s show reunion, but Topher Grace wasn't available. How can you have an early mid 2010s Patriots reunion and not have Malcolm Butler? That's that 70s show without Eric Foreman, right? So you have to talk about it. I don't think he shows up, but boy, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
So I was listening to your friend, the Dark Knight, Adam Jones, last night for a few minutes, and he had to take, and this is not my take, this is Adam Jones's take.
I know which one you're talking about.
That this could be a distraction for the team, right? You bring back Malcolm Butler. You say, we've made amends. We've gotten over the 2017 Super Bowl. Everybody's happy. Everybody's fine, right? You play the 2014 Super Bowl highlight, the interception at the goal line 10,000 times. We brought back Malcolm Butler, and this could be a media distraction for Tom Brady leaving and the situation the Patriots are in and how bad a football team they were last year relative to what they have been. Now, that's all well and good. That's some, your talk radio narratives for you, right? But in reality, the one thing that you do have to look at for the argument for Malcolm Butler is that one of the biggest discrepancies in the league right now is wide receiver depth versus cornerback depth. There's wide receivers, except in New England, of course, yin yang everywhere. Everybody's got wide receivers. There's 20 more in the draft that might go in the first 2 days, right? 20. So the whole league is loaded at that position. The cornerbacks, on the other hand, don't have the same kind of depth. The Patriots are one of those teams that do have good depth at the cornerback spot. Whether they move on from Stephon Gilmore or not, Malcolm Butler being your fourth corner on your team, if you still have Gilmore, you still have J.C. Jackson and Jonathan Jones in the slot, and Malcolm Butler factors in as a fourth guy, maybe as an upgrade over Jason McCourty or something like that. the Patriots are one of the few teams that actually have the corners and have the horses to line up against all these teams that have 10 wide receivers and tight ends, if you can combine those two depth charts.
Again, yeah, like I said, I mean, there's, a reason why bringing in a guy like that makes sense, but there's other options that are comparable to Malcolm Butler who don't have the history with the team. And that's what stops this from happening. But again, you got to talk about it because it would be interesting as hell if it did.
That's what we do here. We talk about things because it would be interesting as hell if it did happen.
I mean, come on. You don't think there's any juice there? You're making fun of me for saying it'd be interesting. There's no juice for you if Malcolm Butler just comes back.
I told you what the juice is. It's Pac-Man's take, right? It's oh, we're back, right? And 2017 never happened, and everyth's fine.
But doesn't it?
Actually, we actually won that Super Bowl. Didn't you know that? I mean, that's the take.
Well, all right. Let's not go that far. But it's just like but what if they didn't acknowledge it? What if he was just back and it's like, yeah, Malcolm's back, and then that's the whole conversation? That would be wild. All right. I'm sorry. I'm having too much fun for you.
Yeah,
I know you don't like fun.
So let's talk about these two guys because I think both of them are names that people have brought up. Matt Milano, I want to start with him first. This is a 225-pound coverage linebacker, right? This guy, Matt Milano, is not that much bigger than Kyle Duggar. That's the reality of the situation. He's had some tackling issues in the past too. He is not a very good run defender. And all of these things say, okay, well, it'd be great in one way for Bill Belichick to change his approach at linebacker and get smaller and get more athletic and kind of go where the league is going. But Matt Milano, for all the sort of, people that have put him out there as a name to watch for the Patriots, he does not fit what they do. He is not a thumper. He's not Dante Hightower. He's not Jamie Collins. He's not Jawan Bentley. He is a safety basically disguising as a linebacker. If he played 20 years ago, he'd be playing strong safety. Right? That would be the role that he is playing. So the question is does Bill Belichick go against the grain? Does he go against his usual MO and take a guy like that to upgrade their pass defense? Because he would be a huge upgrade in coverage over the linebackers that they have right now.
Yeah, and I'll take the second guy here, Clowney. And I mean, you were talking to me about it earlier today. I wanted him last year. I
wanted him for 3 years, and they haven't made the move. So.
Right, but do they like him? Do they not? It's hard to tell. But boy, would he be a fit? Would he be exactly what they need? Come in, set the edge right away, consistently every play. The question is, what's the draw for him to come here? Right. He's gotten paid. He's probably looking a little more to win. Maybe he goes back to Tennessee. I don't know what their cap situation is, but if I'm them, I'm trying as hard as I can to keep him around. Given how bad that defense was last year, I think getting him back in place just gives you something on that side of the ball. But yeah, if they can make that happen, I honestly might rather have Clowney than Malonio there. I think I'd rather have Clowney.
I think I'd rather have Clowney too. The question with Clowney, so he's a great run defender, right? So that's a great thing about him. But he likes to be flashy with the run defense, right? He likes to slip blocks. He likes to jump in the backfield. He's not necessarily a super disciplined edge. He's a gap shooter. He's a guy that wants to live in the backfield. That's not, I think from a stylistic perspective, that might be one of the things that's holding them up from a football point of view. And then also there's the stuff that like Mike Lombardi has said in the past with the work ethic and the drive and the sort of fitting into the culture stuff. As a pass rusher, he's a perfect fit here because he's great on stunts. He's great over the guards or over the center when, we've seen Dante Hightower kind of move inside at some points and rush as like a stand-up guy on the interior. David Clowney could do all of those types of things. So the question really is do they think he'll buy in? Do they think that he's a Patriot type of guy? And is he disciplined enough on the edge for their style? Because they just want guys that are going to park outside the C gap and hold that edge. They don't want somebody that's going to try to jump inside. They don't want somebody that's going to try to fire off the ball into the backfield to make a tackle for loss because they feel like their system is more important than those splash plays, right? If everybody just does their job, and the whole thing will hold up. And I don't know if Clowney is necessarily a do-your-job type of edge defender, but he definitely has a lot of playmaking that they could desperately need at that spot.
I think they need to go beyond, and look, they can't just bring in anybody, but I think they need to go beyond the do your job thing a little bit. and see if maybe they can find some middle ground with these guys, like I talked about with JuJu, right? Especially if it's a 1-year deal guy where you're not making them a cornerstone of your locker room or something like that, or a vocal point in your locker room. I think that they might need to look beyond that this year. And Clowney, I think, is the prime example of you're going to get a ton of talent if you do it, and you just kind of, he might freelance here and there, but they need talent. They can't be picky about it. So
I want to talk about Amari Rodgers because this is one of my favorite prospects in the draft. Clemson's pro day was today, and he was looking out great and also worked out a little bit at running back. And I tweeted out there the video, and people thought he was a running back, and I was saying they should draft a running back. He's a wide receiver. He's in that Deebo Samuel type of mold, right? Where he's a running back build. He's got running back size, especially in his legs. He's got great elusiveness, great contact balance with the football, but he's really, really shifty at the top of the route and really, really quick at the top of the route. He's only about 5'9", 5'10", so he's a slot receiver, but this is definitely a player I think would fit extremely well. And to me, if they drafted him, it'd sort of make up for the fact that they took N'Keal Harry over Deebo, right? That's sort of making up for that one in my estimation, just because they are very similar players in my eyes.
There's a couple Clemson receivers to like, and I mean, completely different kind of receiver, but I also like Cornell Powell.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
If they take somebody who came out of that pro day today, I think that'd be a good move. I think the Clemson guys are good to target. Again, different receivers, but they need a little bit of everything. So I don't think I'm as high on Amari Rodgers as some people are, but I think he's a good player. He's a good pick. Like, I wouldn't be upset if they took him. I see some people talking about, trading into the back end of the first round for him. I'm not quite there, but no, he's a good player.
No, I don't think that he's going to be that, but he is going in the second round. I can guarantee you that. I don't think he's getting out of the top 64 picks. He's too good with the ball in his hands. He's too good at the top of the round. So, too explosive of a playmaker to fall out of the second round.
Well, if you're looking for that hybrid, let me ask you this, because they met with Demetric Felton, or we found out yesterday that they met with Demetric Felton. It might have been yesterday. I don't know when the meeting was, but if you're looking at Amari Rodgers in the second round or Demetric Felton potentially in the fourth round, like, I kind of drawn to Felton if those are my two choices.
Right. So
my eyes go a little more that way.
Felton reminds me a lot of Antonio Gibson last year, who's on the Washington football team now. He's a gadget player. He's like a Swiss Army knife type of guy, right? He can play a little bit of running back. He can play a little bit of wide receiver.
Well, he was recruited as a wide receiver and played 75% of his snaps as a slot receiver as a freshman. By his senior year, 90% of the time he was a running back. And he lined up outside here and there too. Like, it's not that he's a running back who knows how to play like a wide receiver. He's played both positions. So
yeah. So it's a little bit like that. It's a little bit like Lynn Bowden Jr., who I liked last year as well from Kentucky, who can kind of do it all as well. I think with Felton, though, what you look at is that Senior Bowl week, right? That's
really good. Yeah.
Really good, especially during practice, but he had that touchdown in the beginning of the game as well. But in practice, he was torching guys in one-on-ones, right? Just torching guys. And that's something that the Patriots definitely are going to take notice on. They are doing a ton of homework on guys that were down there in Mobile again this year. And you said something about them taking a guy from Clemson's pro day, and Felton went to UCLA, so it's not necessarily a football powerhouse, but can we get some big colleges this time around? You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Can we take somebody in the first round that went to Alabama or went to Clemson or went to
Mr. Trey Lance is out here campaigning. Okay, get ready for Trey Lance and Quinn Meritz.
Right. So if I like Quinn Meritz. I think he's a great story, great prospect.
That would be a good draft, but there's no big colleges.
No, please no. Can we get a name brand, please?
So you never answered. I think UCLA, a Power 5, former national championship winner. I think they qualify. Legacy-wise, they're probably more blue blood than Clemson. Honestly, Clemson's hotter right now. But if you look at the history of college football, I'd take UCLA. You didn't answer my question though. Amari Rodgers in the second or Demetric Felton in the fourth? If you have to go one of those routes.
I'm really in on Amari Rodgers, so okay. I'm going to say.
I don't think there's a wrong answer. I'm not trying to put you in a spot. I'm just curious.
No, I think I'm going to say Amari Rodgers for that one because I know that he's more polished than Demetric Felton at this stage. The problem that I get with the guys like Demetric Felton, and I know he has a lot of reps at receiver, but you do fear that there is going to be a pretty big learning curve in terms of him learning a role full time. Right. Sure. And you don't want to get too caught up in making him everything. Right. Because for a rookie, that can be really overwhelming. So you kind of have to pick a lane and stay in it. Now, guys have done it. Tyreek Hill was a running back. He becomes into the NFL. He's a full-time receiver. Curtis Samuel was a running back and now is a wide receiver full-time. So it's doable, but I think once you commit, you got to stay committed to that player in that position. So that I think is a good question. Let's end on this one because I think you asked me about this player the other day.
I was going to bring this one up. Yeah.
So he just weighed in at his pro day, at a little over 6'3.5" and 256 pounds. So Patriots edge defender to a T. From
you left out the best measurement. He had a record. His vertical was 41.5 inches. He had some sort of record vertical.
Yeah, 41.5, I think it was. So he reminds me of a bigger Chase Winovich in a lot of ways because he's a guy that has a really high motor, really explosive off the ball, great first step from a 2-point stance especially. He's really springy out of his stance, right? He can really fly. But he's an inconsistent run defender. He's struggled against the run, but he's got the size. So there's a chance that at 255, 256 pounds, that with some coaching, with some technique work, you can get that much better run defender out of him over time. I think that in day 2, maybe the 3rd round, maybe that 96th pick, which is they're not going to draft at 96. But
I mean, do you think he gets there?
Maybe not, but this is a weird edge class because it's not. There's not a ton of talent on day 1 at edge. I mean, I think Kwity Paye will go in the first round. I think Azeez Ojulari from Georgia has a chance to go round 1. But other than that, you're really talking about a whole lot of guys on day 2. So at some point, there's going to be a run on all these edge defenders. Jalen Phillips and Quincy Roach and Greg Russo and Jason Hawaii from Penn State and Owasu from Texas and Rashad Weaver. I could go all the way down the line. These guys are day 2 guys, I think, in my mind. But ultimately, maybe he doesn't make it to that 3rd round pick. Who knows?
Yeah, I think he goes somewhere late in the 2nd round, maybe early in the 3rd. In the trend of recent years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the Patriots have had a tendency in terms of their front 7 to draft guys who are more athletically gifted that they can mold as opposed to technically skilled guys who, are still developing as athletes. And if you look at a guy like it's Osei, right? Osei. I haven't heard it out loud. I've only read it.
I think it's Osei, but I don't know.
Osei, can you see? I just think, a guy, he fits that mold where he's a supreme athlete. He's got a great motor. He's got great football instincts. He's just very raw. He doesn't know how to play the position technically yet. He's a little slow diet. Like he has the instincts, but I don't think he knows why he does what he does, right? A lot of the scouts have said that he's instinctual, but he doesn't really know how to read a play, how to see a run play develop and know how to attack it. If the quarterback's rolling out, how to read that situation, but that's all coachable. So if you get this guy who can jump out of the gym and is, has the speed, has the strength,
yes.
Right, then all you got to do is teach him how to play football, which on the defensive side of the ball, Patriots are good at doing. So that's the kind of guy they target, and I think he's one of the prime examples of that in this class. Jalen Phillips from Miami is another one. He's going to go a little bit higher. But, if you're looking at the Patriots taking defensive end on day 2, this is the kind of guy you're looking at right here.
Yeah, I agree with all that. So the last one that we can wrap it up with, I was trying to find the exact question, but we've gotten some questions about first round corners. We've talked about this a while ago, but I guess we can give our takes about it again. Caleb Farley is another name that I think that we should talk about in this group of 3, but I think it's really going to ultimately come down if they do trade Gilmore and they do want to look for a corner in the first round between J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain. Surtain is the polished guy, the son of the coach, all those types of things. But if you turn on J.C. Horn against Auburn, that's like one of the best cornerback tapes I've ever seen. So both of those guys are really, really good prospects. But how do you feel in general about corner in the first round if they do move on from Gilmore?
Yeah, I don't think I think Surtain's the first corner off the board. I think he's the first defensive player off the board. Yeah, I don't think they get at him without trading up. That being said, I'm not ruling out, like people talk about them trading up for a quarterback. I'm not ruling out them trading up for Surtain either, or another, Penny Sewell. Maybe people would hate it, but I'm not ruling out them trading up for another good player if the deal is there. I think Surtain's off the board. I think Fairley maybe is in that neighborhood. J.C. Horn, certainly. It's kind of which route do they want to go. They both have things that draw your attention. J.C. Horn, Stephon Gilmore Jr., right down to the college at South Carolina. the thing that's interesting about Fairley, and I've said this before on the show, is he's a former quarterback, and they've made a run the last couple of years. Jacoby Myers, Gunner, Rashad Berry, J.C. Jackson. They've made a run on these guys who have changed positions, either entering college or during college. He fits that mold. I don't think I need to explain the advantages a former QB has playing outside corner at the NFL level. So he's a guy, I think 15 might be tough. I think there's a real chance 2 corners go in the top 10. So JC Horn's probably more realistic, but if Fairley is there at 15, that's a tough pass for them. It really is, even with potentially Mac Jones on the board.
Yeah, so I talked about going to, a name brand school for that first round pick. And I don't think it gets any more name brand than Patrick Surtain's son from Alabama, right? Like that's as everything that I've talked about. And JC Horn is Joe Horn's son, of course, the wide receiver from the Saints.
The cell phone.
That's his kid, right? So those are 2 guys that have NFL bloodlines, that have good fathers that have been there and done that. And the Patriots passed on one of those guys last year in Antoine Winfield Jr., whose father was obviously Antoine Winfield and played in the NFL too. And Antoine Winfield Jr. just anchored Tampa Bay secondary in a Super Bowl, right? That was the type of player that they passed on to draft Kyle Duggar. If those 2 guys are there, or one of those 2 guys is there, and they don't have Stephon Gilmore rostered anymore, and they figured out the offense a little bit in free agency, like let's say we get to the draft, and I know this is sort of a,
that's okay. Put the pieces together.
Let's say we get to the draft and Jimmy G's your quarterback already. They have Corey Davis, they have Curtis Samuel, or they have Corey Davis, and they have JuJu Smith or something like that.
Yeah.
And they kind of already figured out that side of the ball, and they had to use Gilmore or trade Gilmore for whatever reason, the contracts dispute or whatever, and they need a cornerback, a number 1 corner. I'm perfectly fine with them taking JC Horn at 15. I think he's a really good player, extremely physical, press man corner, great instincts, feisty, alpha type of mentality on the field, plays the run well, plays the screen game well, physical all throughout, good ball skills. If you want to watch a game to sort of fall in love with JC Horn, his performance against Auburn last year was one of the best cornerback tapes I've seen over the last 3 or 4 years. Just an absolutely dominant from start to finish. And that's the type of guy that I definitely would want on my football team.
So there's a third, if we're going to talk about football family corners, there's actually a third guy that's late day 1, early day 2. But I've talked about.
Are you going where I think you're going with this?
Yes, hang on. I've talked about them possibly trading Stephon Gilmore. I've thrown out 29 to the Packers, and duplicating the Stephon Diggs trade. Maybe it's early second round. And granted, his dad hasn't been exactly complimentary of Belichick lately. Is this where you thought I was going?
Exactly.
Asante Samuel Jr. out of Florida State. That kid can play too. He's not quite on the level of Horn and Fairley. I think he's like, he can be a number 1 corner. I don't know that he can be the ace Stephon Gilmore was, but if you have him and JC Jackson, you're in pretty good shape. You're going to have one of the better 1-2 punches in the league, I think, if Samuel kind of hits the boxes he's supposed to hit. So, there's another one. Maybe they trade back in using the Gilmore pick or elsewhere, late first round, early second round. Samuel, there's one more thing, because you brought up Fairley. I was working on this yesterday.
Is Samuel a nickel? Is he a slot? That's what I wonder about, because he's not a pure outside corner to me, but he is a guy that I think can travel with Z receivers. He reminds me, and from that respect, a lot of Malcolm Butler, right? A guy that you're not necessarily going to put on the outside full time, but is somebody that can travel with a guy that's going to move around the formation. So that might be a guy that they look at as more of like a slot nickel type. He's got the fluidity. He's got that type of skill to him. He's just not the best when he's got to turn his back and play the ball, play the receiver and not play the ball. So I wonder if he moves more towards the middle of the field. But what's your last point?
So my last point, because you brought up Fairley, I was fooling around with this yesterday, and I talked before about how the Patriots have been bringing in these guys who changed positions.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't say it's realistic, but it's possible that the Patriots can go 4 or 5 picks, all taking guys who changed positions as freshmen in college or later. Like if they take Fairley at 15, trade to the back end of the first or early second round, and they take Kadarius Toney, they take Chaz Surratt at 46, right, with that other second round pick, and then James Hudson, who's a tackle from Cincinnati, who kind of fits their mold of like developmental offensive lineman, which they love, was originally recruited to Michigan as a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of those guys in this draft, and I wouldn't be surprised if they end up with one or two. I don't think they're going to draft 4 or 5 of them in a row.
So
that's probably a bit much. But
one of the ones that you didn't mention is my boy Zaven Collins, who played quarterback.
Zaven Collins, another one. You're right. Yeah. So
that's high school, but he played quarterback. Chaz Surratt was a quarterback too, right? And then
but he was a quarterback in college. Like he started games for UNC. So there's like a number of guys, and I wouldn't be surprised. And the reason I thought of this, I wouldn't be surprised if they walk away from this draft with 1 or 2 of these position change guys. And I think Fairley's the best one. Fairley's the best position change guy in this draft. So if that's something that they are putting serious stock into, then I think you seriously have to consider Fairley if he's on the board.
He's an electric athlete. He's got some rawness to him. His technique needs some work because of that position switch. He's not a natural yet at that position, but he is such a great athlete that he can really make plays on the football. And that's a difference between guys that are twitchy and explosive like Fairley. Usually that leads to really good interception totals, pass breakups, things like that, because they can break on the ball really fast, right? So that's the sort of guy that if you want somebody that's going to be a turnover machine, then that's certainly a name to look out for. The image of Chaz Surratt that I just can't get out of my head is Christian Darrisaw blocking him like 20 yards down the field on a running
Christian
play.
Darrisaw is very good though.
That's what he's going to face in the NFL every week.
But Surratt, he's going to, and I was on a podcast last night with Pat Lane and Ryan Spags from Pat's Bolter, right? And we had the same conversation. I don't remember if we were talking about Surratt or Nick Bolton, but Pat and I both love the players, and Ryan was saying that they're too small. A lot of college players are too small. The workout regimen is so different in college. Most of the time when you get these guys into an NFL locker room, and an NFL weight room more specifically is what I should have said, the size issue goes away. Now, height's another story, and it doesn't happen with everybody, but if a linebacker's 220 and you want him playing at 245, you can normally do that with a guy coming right out of college. So
Bolton's a little bit different to me because he is rocked up, right? He's a sturdy guy.
Bolton's a little different because it's a height thing, and that's slightly different.
My concern about Bolton is actually more about his hip stiffness and his ability to play in coverage, not necessarily that he's not going to be strong enough to hold up in the trenches in the NFL. That's not a concern. With Chaz Surratt, I know he can cover. I know he can fly sideline to sideline. My concern with him is that clip that Christian Darrisaw blocking him 20 yards down the field.
And I'm telling you, I just think he's going to put some weight on, and he's never going to be a big, physically imposing linebacker. Right. But there's a lot of good linebackers in this league right now playing at about 230, 240 pounds. So it's not out of character. I know we need to go. There's one more we need to take here.
Real quick. Do you think that these people like get together and like have little powwows that all have these takes, right? About how Brady made up for Belichick's mistakes and his bad roster management and his bad draft. It's like, because it's always the same sort of message. You know what
wording.
I mean?
So it's not... There's a level of truth to it, but you're only telling half the story. Like, yes, there were times where Belichick screwed up and Brady covered it up. There were also times where Brady screwed up and Belichick covered it up. That's just any work environment, right? There's been times where you said a player or I said a player and I got the name wrong and you corrected me. There were times when you screwed up on something and I corrected you. Like, that's just a working environment. So, yes, I don't think that statement, it's written dramatically, but I don't think that statement at surface level is false. I just don't think you're telling, it's a half truth, right? It's a lie by omission. So I think it's just
a meeting or something that I'm missing. Like, I want to go.
There's just too many people who like to bend narratives. It's a really easy narrative to bend, right? It's anytime people bring this up, I say Tom Brady's the greatest rushing quarterback of all time, because I can give you the evidence to prove it. It's only telling half the story.
What's your last question?
The last question was from Julian. You got to scroll back. It was, are we doing any shows during free agency?
I was
and I think we should plug that because I'm very. Do you want to plug it, or you're the host? You should plug it. But I'm very excited.
Let's plug it. So we're going to.
Do you want to plug it, or do you want me to plug it? You're the host. You plug it. All right. But I am excited. Go ahead.
So we're going to do a daily show next week during free agency every night. We're thinking around 7 p.m., right? Is that the final time?
Yeah, it'll be some point after sundown. I'll be vague like that. But You'll follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated. The details are still being worked out. But.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that we're going on at a time where we have the most news possible, and we don't want to sign off and then 10 seconds later have another breaking news thing happen. That's obviously could happen. There's nothing we can do to control it, but we're hoping that we get into a position where we have all the information at hand. So next week, every single day, Monday through Friday, we are going to be on here on the stream talking Patriots free agency, talking moves around the league, all that kind of stuff. You can bring your questions if you have questions, and we are definitely going to be here for that. And this pushed over an hour. We can probably do it again next week the same exact way.
We'll go as long as you guys bring the questions. You keep it interesting, we'll keep it interesting. That's the deal. Two-way street.
Exactly. And then so we'll be back on Monday, not Tuesday, Monday this time, for our daily free agency show. Again, that's every single day next week. Same places here. We'll update you on the time on my Twitter at EasyLazar or Alex's Twitter at RealAlexBarth. And we'll be here all week with you next week to break down free agency. And I know I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a really interesting week. Don't get nervous if there's not a ton of moves right away, because this is a really weird market. There's not a whole lot of cap space out there. Players and agents are going to sort of have to feel this out. So it could be a couple of days before you start hearing some of the big names sign, but we are definitely going to be there with you every step of the way next week, and Alex and I will break it all down for you then. But signing off for now, for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching and participating in the Q&A, guys. We really appreciate the questions.
See you Monday.